Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. Today's video is another viewers requested video and it's a spotlight. And today's highlighted orchid is Dendrobium victoria-reginae. And yeah, let's get going and have a closer look. Okay, now my version of this is a little unusual, but I'll go into that in a minute. This particular Dendrobium is found in the Philippines. I'm not sure it's found anywhere else. That's the only references I've come across. It was first described in the late 1800s and obviously was named after or named for Queen Victoria, hence the name. Now this tends to be, out of most of the Dendrobiums, you should put this really up the shadier end. This comes from quite dense mossy forests, quite high, so it is actually a cool grower. It will tolerate heat, but it will slow down its growth. Prolonged extreme heat probably won't do it any good. It is a cool grower, and it's only ever been found, generally accepted, it's found growing in moss. So not on bare tree trunks or branches or anything like that, it's always growing in moss. Given the type of forests it comes from, which are moist, constantly wet, mossy forests, that sort of stands to reason, because it might not get much choice where it grows. But anyway, it certainly likes to be growing in moss. So large areas of bare root are not ideal, he says, pointing the camera at a large area of bare root. I'll go into that in a minute. Right, so the forests tend to be made, or tend to contain, oaks and pines and rhododendrons. Now, all three of those types of trees tend to grow in slightly acidic soils. Not silly acidic, not sort of peat bog levels, but slightly acidic. But it would depend on the type of oaks. I think the type of oaks from the Philippines are mainly stone oaks, and it's difficult to find out what type of soil they grow on. Given their name, I would imagine it's sort of stony, poor quality soil, but I don't know that for a fact. Rhododendrons certainly need acidic soil, but pines vary, again, depends on the species. But you have to bear in mind the Dendrobium we're talking about doesn't grow on the ground. It grows in the mossy areas on the trees. Well, just because a tree is growing in acidic soil doesn't mean to say that the moss growing on the branches is acidic. Moss, generally speaking, is a little acidic. So I would say that keeping your pH on the lower side when watering this one would be good for it. And on the lower side for me is around 6. Certainly I never go below 5.8. That's my absolute low point. But a low pH for me would be around 6. My normal pH for watering is 6.3 to 6.6 on the grounds that I only use organic media, and that has an element of acidifying, in other words, lowering the pH as the water is absorbed into that type of media. Sphagnum moss does it best and actually lowers the pH quite dramatically. Bark does it a bit, but it depends how old the bark is. The older the bark, the more it will turn. So there we go. Right, so why is my plant a little unusual? Well, it's because it's two. Now the original plant, which is the old part, which starts down here with the rotting base, not very good at all, and goes right up here and has the old shrivelling type canes on it. and these couple of manky ones. And as it wasn't doing very well, I decided to buy another one, and there were some reasonable plants at Burnham's at the time, so I bought one home. And I thought, well, I'll give the old one a chance and mount the new one on the same mount. Then if the old one dies, I've still got a plant, if you see what I mean, rather than having it as two separate plants on two separate mounts. These can be grown in pots. They will normally have trouble staying upright. They will normally arch and often become pendulous. And if you happen to be lucky enough to have a cane that's still got some leaves on and it produces a load of flowers, the weight will probably bend it and put a kink in it. So go steady. Right, this old plant produced a kiki up here, that's that cane, and it produced another one down here. So this one is also a kiki. And I made sure that that got some moss underneath it to see if it would grow some roots. Well, it never did. So this old part of the plant is not up to much, but I'll have to pick this up and turn it round. That's a flower bud. And that is on the aforementioned kiki that I just said got put near the top with some moss. Yeah? So we have a flower bud. It's not going to come to much. I mean, this kiki, I'm not even sure it's joined on. Right, so then we come to the second plant, which is this one. Now, this was growing reasonably upright at the time, and I thought, well, we'll turn it over and hang it down, make it pendulous. It had finished growing, so it wasn't really going to do much else. They do become deciduous, but they can take a few years to do it. They will hold their leaves a while. So anyway, I planted it. I got this September last year. And if you're interested, the end screen on this video is me mounting this as a new plant on this mount. So that's the end screen. So this video runs into another one should you choose to watch it. Right, so what else have we got? So on this really old part of the plant that's not up to much, it's pushed out a new shoot recently that's growing reasonably well. It's pushing on anyway. So there was life in that plant. We've now got signs of flower buds, although that's not going to come to much, and we have a new growth. So that's that on the old plant. On the new plant, again, relatively recently, this sat here and did nothing for some considerable time. And then relatively recently, from the base, we got these two new growths and a whole set of new roots. Yeah? Now, these roots here will get down into this moss. These going across the top of these canes might end up on the bark. They might just fail, but they're not going to get into any moss because there isn't any. And I'm not covering these roots with moss because I'll be covering the canes as well. And they're quite easy to rot at the best of times. So the original roots from this plant you can see are the darker green ones underneath. That's where it was watered recently. And then the newer ones are the ones with the bright green tips. And some of those growing upwards will go into this moss up here. The ones growing downwards will get into this moss. So they will get into some moss. Now, if we study this newer part of the plant a little bit more closely, what do we see on this cane? We see some bulbous swellings. So we might be going to get some blooms on these newer canes. I'd be surprised because these normally bloom on deciduous canes, on the bare canes. Normally straight after the leaves drop. Their popular bloom time is May, June time, but they can bloom any time, quite honestly. But yes, there are some swellings on this cane in several places. We will see if they develop. Now, as I said, with this one, because of where it grows, it stays moist year round. There's no rest period for this. But I would suggest in our country, you have to bear in mind the environment. Think of the Philippines. Do they get really short, dull days in their, well, you can't really call it winter, they're not far off the equator, are they? But in their drier season? And the answer is probably no, they don't. Their day lengths, you know, their amount of usable daylight doesn't get right down to the level ours does. Because of that, I would suggest it should be kept a bit drier in the winter, or it could be subject to rot, because its growth level is going to slow down because of that lack of daylight hours. So if you've got artificial lighting and can keep those hours up to normality, then it will continuously grow. It's a cool grower, so you don't have to worry about temperatures. It can probably go down to 10 degrees, I would imagine, 12 comfortable, but it does grow pretty high up. And the type of forest it comes from are pretty shady, so it's classed as a shade lover. Again, stop and think. A forest in the Philippines, the shady forest in the Philippines compared with the light levels we get in the UK, I would suggest in the UK it's not a shade lover, it's medium, possibly even medium bright. I wouldn't put that in deep shade in the UK. Now I grow it on this post here. So in my grow room, that is a shady spot. It's got flipping great cotyledons above it, casting shade from the roof and also stopping any bright light coming in from the side. Not that much bright light comes in from there because of that huge hedge and the massive oak tree outside. So in my grow room, it's in a relatively shady spot. Along with the cotyledons up this end. This is the bright end up here. This is the shady end. And this one is in a slightly more shady space. It's down with the Miltoniopsis. Yeah, so that's where I grow mine. And the new plant stopped growing basically when I mounted it, and I thought it's not going to be successful. It's not doing very well. There's no new roots, so it's only recently it's done new roots and new growths, and this growth has come out of the old plant. So it's sort of coming back to life. There's a possibility of some flowers coming on this cane. I don't see any signs on this cane. And in addition, on this particular cane, I suspect these leaves are going to drop soon. They're showing signs of going yellow. That's natural. As I said, it is deciduous. If you see a really mature plant, there will be more deciduous canes than not. So, you know, they do go that way. So my job here is to feed and keep moist. I won't say water well, because there's a fair bit of moss on this mount, and obviously it holds an awful lot of moisture. So its ideal circumstances are that the moss is damp. So when I water it, I don't drown it. I don't chuck loads of water on. I dribble it on until I can see the moss going that darker green, at which point it's quite damp. And then I wait towards dryness this time of year. In the winter, I would probably not water it that often, simply because the amount of daylight is so short. Temperature in the winter in here is fine. I go down to 12, so that will be fine for it. So availability. This is one of the Dendrobiums that you can get hold of in the UK. You'd probably be able to get it from Trey Saunders. Burnham's have definitely got some. Isle of Portland, they're coming up to a rather special time. They have two huge specimen plants, but they're different. One of them is a very vigorous grower and prolific bloomer, but it has relatively pale coloured blooms. The other one doesn't grow as vigorously, doesn't produce as many blooms, but the blooms are a much deeper colour. more desirable, shall we say. Well, they've crossed the two together, and they have a load of seedlings which I think are probably going to come up for sale next year. So if you wanted something to grow on that probably nobody else has got, I'll be after one, that should be relatively vigorous with the deeper coloured blooms, because the blooms are variable. They can be quite pale. Lots of people have said it depends on how much shade and how cool they are. Given that they bloom May, June time, in this country a lot of people's temperatures would be climbing, if not heading up towards their top sort of temperatures. And it's said that the deepest coloured blooms are produced in the coolest temperatures with the shade. I don't know, because I haven't experimented. But I've read that in enough places. There must be something in it. I'm not saying it's absolutely true. I'm just saying, you know, no smoke without fire and all that stuff. So anyway, that's a spotlight on Dendrobium victoria-reginae, or reginae, however you want to say it. I've seen that written with the AE on the end, and I've also seen it written without. In other words, the same spelling as Queen Victoria would be. But I think the RHS have it registered with the AE on the end, as in Latin, you know, so that's how it's probably meant to be. But it's a relatively easy thing to grow, providing you bear in mind those differences to many other Dendrobium types. It doesn't have a winter rest. If it had the right amount of daylight hours, it would be a continuous grower. It wouldn't slow up much in the winter time, UK winter time, and you could keep it growing year round. And if you could do that, you would end up with a larger, heading towards specimen sized plant much quicker. You know, I can't do that. Mine's going to slow right up in the winter because of the lack of light. So the one thing I will do this winter is I'll move it from its shadiest spot and put it somewhere brighter, so that the daylight hours it does get are brighter than they would be stuck under those huge leaves of the cotyledons. So I will be changing its position once we get to those shorter daylight hours, and we'll see how we do, see if that changes the way it acts. But hopefully we should see. I don't hold out a lot of hope for this becoming much of a flower spike. Chances are it might even fail, I don't know. But if it does manage to succeed, I suspect it'll be one bud, so it won't be up to much. And then the nubbins that are showing on this one might not even develop, but I mean, if you look here, this one is definitely pushing on. The nubbins are opposite the leaves on the opposite side. This one's definitely got a bit of colour on it, as has this one. It's even got what looks like a bud on the end of the cane. So we may get some blooms down the line. So anyway, that's it for this one. As I've said, the end screen, when it comes up in a minute with the invite, you know, if you like this one, perhaps you could watch another one. That end screen is mounting this plant on this mount. So that was when it was new and didn't have all these roots and new shoots, and the old plant certainly didn't have that new growth. So that goes back to, I think I did that in October last year. So yeah. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed that. As I said, this Dendrobium is not, I wouldn't say it's a difficult plant to grow, and relatively speaking to a lot of Dendrobiums, it's probably easier to find than many. So you could give it a go. You could look out for it and give it a go. And if you can get, obviously pushing it along from a seedling will, you know, that's a little bit more delicate, shall we say. But if you can get a reasonable sized plant with a few canes on, might be worth giving it a go. The blooms are well worth it. They are stunning. I suppose we'd better have a picture, haven't we? There we go. But yes, and obviously the deeper the colour and the larger the blooms, because the blooms are variable in both size and colour, and the number on the clusters. The clusters can vary from 1 normally up to 3 or 4, but I've seen a cluster with 7 on a show plant. Yeah, so that's what you've got to aim at, is get up to your specimen size plant, keep it going, look after it, and you'll get rewarded with these blooms. So okay, so as again, an invite to watch the next video if you choose to do so, and if not, I shall see you in the next one. Thanks for dropping by.